In the Middle Ages, beauty was not defined by full lips or long lashes. It was something far stranger, far more unsettling to our modern eyes. To be considered beautiful, a woman was expected to remove her eyebrows and even her eyelashes, stripping away what we see today as symbols of expression, vitality, and seduction. But why? Why would women across Europe submit themselves to this painful ritual? Tonight, we step into the candlelit halls of medieval castles, the cloisters of monasteries, and the brushstrokes of Gothic paintings to uncover the bizarre secret of medieval beauty. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange and dark histories. In medieval Europe, the human face was seen as more than flesh and bone. It was a symbol, a mirror of the soul, and in women, a declaration of virtue. To us, eyebrows and eyelashes frame the eyes, adding emotion and depth. But in the Middle Ages, these features were often seen as distractions, even as signs of wildness or vanity. A pure face, in contrast, was smooth, pale, and serene, echoing the holy images of the Virgin Mary found in cathedral murals. Eyebrows? Too animalistic, eyelashes? Too sensual, hinting at lust. To erase them was to tame the body, to reshape the face into a higher spiritual ideal. One of the most striking beauty ideals of the 14th and 15th centuries was the high forehead. Women plucked their brows and lashes not only for smoothness, but also to make the forehead appear larger, rounder, and more luminous. Contemporary manuscripts, medical texts, and even poems praised the noble brow. A high forehead signified intelligence, dignity, and aristocratic refinement. To achieve this look, women would sometimes not only pluck brows, but shave the hairline itself, moving it inches back to create the illusion of a vast, shining forehead. In portraits of noblewomen from Burgundy to Florence, this aesthetic is unmistakable. Faces look almost alien to us, stretched, pale, with eyes floating in a smooth expanse of skin. But to medieval eyes, it was divine beauty. The Church's influence on beauty standards cannot be overstated. Medieval Christianity taught that women's natural bodies, especially their physical allure, were dangerous temptations leading men to sin. Thus, suppressing features linked to lust was a kind of virtue. Eyelashes, in particular, had connotations of flirtation. A long-lashed blink could be seen as seductive. Removing them was a way to appear modest, controlled, and pious. In convents, nuns sometimes plucked their brows as part of vows of humility. In courts, noblewomen did the same, not to humble themselves, but to display purity and refinement. Two worlds, sacred and secular, met on the same canvas of the face. Imagine the process. No tweezers as we know them, no soothing creams. Instead, iron pins, small blades, or simple fingers tugging hair one by one. The pain must have been sharp, the eyes watering, the skin inflamed. Yet women endured, because beauty required sacrifice. Some recipes for depilatory ointments survive from medieval medical texts. A mix of vinegar, walnut oil, and even frog fat was sometimes recommended to thin hair or make it fall out more easily. Whether these worked or only burned the skin, we may never know. But they tell us something crucial. Plucking brows and lashes was not a fringe practice. It was widespread enough to be written into books of remedies. At the heart of this strange aesthetic was the courtly gaze. In royal courts, women were judged constantly by kings, nobles, poets, and painters. A woman's face was not entirely her own. It was a public symbol of her family's prestige. Letters between nobles describe women with clear foreheads as paragons of beauty. Artists like Jan van Eyck or Rogier van der Weyden painted women with almost no brows, their serene faces reflecting not sensuality, but a kind of distant holiness. To pluck the brows was to erase not only hair, but individuality. Expression was softened, subdued, made acceptable to the ideals of restraint and control. In medieval Europe, medicine and beauty often intertwined in strange ways. Physicians and herbalists recorded recipes not only to cure illnesses, but to control the body's appearance. Eyebrows and eyelashes, according to some medical texts, were thought to trap sweat, dirt, and even bad humors. Removing them, it was said, could prevent disease. Though primitive by modern standards, these beliefs added another justification for the painful ritual. In the Tachinum Sanitatis, a famous 14th century health handbook, women are depicted with smooth, wide foreheads. Marginal notes hint at the connection between clean brows and a healthy complexion. So for some, plucking was not only about beauty, it was framed as hygiene, even medicine. Beyond tweezers and blades, medieval women relied on concoctions to thin their brows and lashes. Surviving manuscripts mention mixtures of vinegar and quicklime to burn away hair at the root, walnut oil or goose fat, applied nightly to weaken follicles, arsenic powders, yes, poison, used in tiny amounts as depilatory. These treatments were risky. Skin irritation, chemical burns, even poisoning could result. Yet the desire to maintain the ideal of the bare forehead was powerful enough to outweigh such dangers. In noble households, servants sometimes performed the plucking, making it part of a larger beauty ritual alongside whitening the skin with lead-based powders. Rare personal writings give us a glimpse into how women felt about this practice. In one 15th century Italian diary, a young noblewoman wrote, "Today my maid plucked my lashes, and I wept for the sting. Yet my husband looked upon me with favor, and so I endured." Another account from Burgundy describes a mother instructing her daughter, "The pain of the brows is short, but the beauty it grants lasts all season." These voices reveal not only suffering, but acceptance. For many women, the ritual was passed down like embroidery or etiquette, a mark of belonging to the world of refinement. Not everyone admired the look. Some critics, especially among clergy, mocked noblewomen for disfiguring their natural faces. A 14th century preacher thundered, "God gave you lashes to guard the eyes, and you plucked them out to guard your vanity." In satire, poets ridiculed the fashion. One French verse described a lady with a forehead so vast, one could ride a cart across it. Yet ridicule rarely slowed the trend. Just as today's extreme beauty rituals survived criticism, medieval women persisted. To appear with thick brows in court was to risk being seen as provincial, unrefined, even sinful. The strongest evidence of this beauty practice comes not from words, but from art. In portraits across Europe, Bruges, Florence, Paris, women gaze out with serene, almost inhuman faces. Their foreheads are pale crescents, their brows erased, lashes invisible. Painters emphasize the ideal by smoothing away what nature had given. For example, Jan van Eyck's portrait of Margaret van Eyck shows a woman with a broad, hairless forehead, her gaze calm and timeless. Rogier van der Weyden's Madonnas likewise echo the same blank beauty, linking noblewomen to divine purity. Art immortalized the standard, and once beauty is sanctified on canvas, it becomes almost impossible to resist in life. Some recipes for brow removal also strayed into the world of magic. One manuscript advised reciting a charm while plucking, to banish lustful spirits. Another suggested rubbing owl's blood mixed with herbs across the brow to prevent regrowth. Here we see the overlap of superstition and science. To medieval minds, the body was not merely physical. It was spiritual, symbolic, even magical. Thus, the act of erasing brows and lashes was not only cosmetic. It was ritual, a transformation of the self into something closer to an idealized image of virtue and control. By the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the world was changing. The Renaissance brought a new fascination with nature, realism, and the celebration of the human form. Painters like Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael emphasized detail, light, and natural proportion. And with this shift came a slow rebellion against the bare forehead. Eyebrows began to creep back into portraits, faint at first, then darker and fuller. Eyelashes, once erased, were painted delicately, their presence no longer considered a sign of lust, but of natural beauty. The smooth, alien look of the medieval lady began to fade, replaced by a vision closer to what we recognize today. A face framed by its natural features, expressive and alive. Yet fashions never vanish overnight. In some corners of Europe, especially among older noble families, the practice of brow and lash removal lingered into the 16th century. Letters and sumptuary laws reveal noblewomen still plucking to maintain the noble forehead. But in the glittering courts of Renaissance Italy and France, women with natural brows began to dominate. Eyebrows, carefully shaped rather than removed, became symbols of elegance. The pendulum had swung. Looking back, we see the true cost of this medieval fashion. It was not only the physical pain of plucking, or the burns of lime and vinegar, or even the risks of poison. It was the erasure of individuality. The absence of eyebrows and lashes muted expression. A raised brow, a skeptical glance, the flutter of lashes, all these subtle signals of personality were lost. What remained was a mask, serene but impersonal. To conform to the standard was to sacrifice not only hair, but the freedom to display one's emotions openly. When the Renaissance and Reformation began reshaping Europe, some moralists looked back on the medieval obsession with bare faces as proof of vanity and decadence. Preachers warned against the false face that women had once worn. In Protestant tracts, bare brows were mocked as symbols of Catholic excess, while Catholic moralists blamed it on aristocratic corruption. The practice became a cautionary tale. Beauty can corrupt, ideals can enslave, and even a forehead can become a battlefield of morality. And yet, the story does not end in the past. Today, we may no longer pluck every lash, but beauty still demands sacrifice. We endure waxing, threading, microblading, extensions, tattoos, all in pursuit of the ideal look of our own time. In fact, the eyebrow remains one of the most changeable symbols of beauty. In the 1920s, women shaved brows into thin lines. In the 1980s, thick natural brows dominated. In the 2010s, Instagram brows rose with hyper-defined arches. Now trends shift again towards softer, natural looks. History repeats. The medieval woman who bled as her lashes were plucked is not so distant from the modern woman who endures the sting of a needle for permanent makeup. Both are driven by the same force, the power of beauty standards to shape the body, no matter the pain. So what does this bizarre medieval fashion teach us? It shows us that beauty is never natural. It is created by art, by religion, by politics. The bare face of the medieval lady was no accident. It was shaped by the church's demand for modesty, by the court's hunger for status, by painters who immortalized the ideal, and by the women themselves who submitted to pain for acceptance. And it warns us, what we see as beautiful today may be seen as strange, even grotesque, tomorrow. Imagine the candlelit chamber. A noblewoman sits before her mirror, her maid pulling lash by lash, brow by brow. She weeps, but she endures. Tomorrow she will walk into court with her forehead smooth, her face serene, her beauty unquestioned. Centuries later, we look back and wonder, why would anyone do such a thing? And yet, are we so different? For beauty has always demanded sacrifice. And the face, the most human of all canvases, will forever bear the marks of fashion's fleeting commands. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more journeys into dark and strange histories.